So, I'm sorry, Jordan, go ahead.
I have a question. I'm sorry. With the tests and the quizzes and all of the work that we're responsible for doing, are you actually recording the grade that we actually make, or are you just recording that we are actually doing it?
That you're doing it. I mean, the grading is much more for your own reference to see where you are.
Okay.
And I'll look at it, of course, to see where you are as well, just so I have an idea of what you're doing. But, what I would say to you is that, grades on the quizzes are pretty indicative of where you stand.
Right.
And so it's more for your reference than anything else.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so chapter 3 deals with something called encumbrances. An encumbrance is a limitation. So the word encumbered means like weighed down. Like, like I always picture myself, when I rented an apartment for a couple of years, I lived on the 3rd floor. And I mastered the art of taking all the groceries up at one time, because I was up and down 3 flights of stairs with groceries. But I mean, I looked like a pack mule going up, because I had like 30. So that's the mental image that pops up for me when I think of an encumbrance. And an encumbrance is a limitation on the ability to do something. And when it comes to property, to real estate, an encumbrance is any type of restriction that limits the use of the property, or any type of debt that is attached to the property. And so there are lots of ways that ownership rights get limited. I mean, you think about it. You might have zoning rules from your town. You might have federal laws that limit what you can. You can't just go out in your backyard and dump toxic waste on the ground. Well, that's a limitation. The fact that you can't do that, that's a limitation. That's an encumbrance on the property. The fact that there are sidewalks that you have to allow the public to use on your front yard, that's an encumbrance on the property. The fact that there's a debt attached to the property that could result in it being foreclosed on, that's an encumbrance to the property. So an encumbrance is any type of a limitation in the ownership of the property. And there are a bunch of different examples that we're going to go through of them. The most common ones are something called liens. A lien is a debt. And in real estate, we care about mostly something called specific liens. Now, on the test, you may be asked for a difference between specific liens and general liens. I said, bless his heart, I shouldn't even say this. I had one guy in class one time, the entire class, and I don't know if this was more of a commentary on his mind and where it was at, or my ability to enunciate words, but he thought I was saying General Lee, like as in the Dukes of Hazzard, General Lee, the entire time, but I was saying general liens. So yeah, I don't know who that's is worse for, him or me. But specific liens are ones that attach to specific pieces of property, one individual specific piece of property. So most of the time when we're talking about a real estate class, we're talking about specific liens. General liens are liens that attach to the person. Now, from a standpoint of what's better or what's worse, a general lien is much worse for a person, because a general lien attaches to you and everything you own. I mean, let me just give it as an example. If someone doesn't pay their income taxes, which by the way is next week, if you haven't already done it. If somebody doesn't pay their income taxes, they may end up with a lien against them as a person. So what could the IRS take if they have a lien against you as a person? What could the IRS take in order to pay that lien?
Anything and everything.
Anything.
All your money.
Anything and everything.
Your house.
Your house, your car, your retirement
Possession.
funds, anything. They can garnish wages because a general lien attaches to the person and all of their assets. If, however, the same person goes out and borrows money and pledges their home as collateral, if that debt doesn't get paid, what's the worst thing that could happen as a result of that debt not being paid?
Lose their house.
Foreclosure.
Their house.
Could they take other property? Like, say there wasn't, say they foreclosed on the property and they still didn't, and the creditor still didn't get their money. Could they take other property?
No.
No.
And that is the difference between a specific lien and a general lien. Okay. So one thing to remember about specific liens is, and it's probably the most important thing to remember about a specific lien, they actually only matter if you're talking about foreclosure. We don't like to talk about foreclosure. It's like an ugly word. But the truth is, liens are useless unless you talk about foreclosure, because a lien is the right to foreclose. How do we ensure that somebody pays their mortgage? Because if they don't, what happens? They get foreclosed. How do we ensure that somebody pays their property taxes? Because if they don't, what happens?
Foreclosure.
They get foreclosed. And so every specific lien, if you're looking at a coin, it's got two sides. If a lien is on one side, guess what's on the other side of the coin?
Your house?
Foreclosure. Liens and foreclosure go together. You can't be scared of the word foreclosure, because foreclosure is the natural result of a lien. I hear people all the time say, well, they filed a lien against my house, but they would never foreclose. Then why the hell did they bother filing a lien? What exactly was the purpose of filing a lien? The only purpose of filing a lien is to establish the right to do what?
Foreclose your house.
To foreclose. Because the lien doesn't accomplish anything else. That's all a lien does. A lien doesn't make somebody pay. It makes them scared not to pay. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes.
Because if they don't pay, they stand to lose the thing that's been pledged as collateral for the lien, which is the property. And it only affects that one piece of property. Most common examples, of course, are mortgage loans, but also property taxes. Don't pay your property taxes. See what happens. They will foreclose on the property. Don't pay your HOA dues. See what would happen.
How many years on your property tax? Is it more than one?
It depends on the county. Wake County, a year. They'll
Wow.
foreclose. Some
Wow.
other counties, they'll wait a lot longer.
Wow.
Yeah, it really depends on the county. They can do it, and we're going to talk about it as soon as January 6th of the year it's after it's due.
Wow.
They can do it that quickly. Liens are appurtenant. What did we say that word means?
Permanently attached.
Is it the land? Attached.
Permanently, attached to the lien. Not attached to the person who borrowed the money. I don't care who got the money. I don't care who borrowed the money. The lien is attached to what?
The
The
land.
land.
The property.
So we mentioned this yesterday, but it bears repeating because you got to get yourself in the right mindset to be involved in real estate. When we're buying and selling real estate, who are the liens most important to? The buyer or the seller?
The buyer.
The buyer.
The buyer. Because here's the thing, folks. Once the seller has sold the property, do
Out of their hands.
they really give a crap about the liens?
No.
No.
Because the only teeth to the liens is that they could foreclose on the property. Well, go ahead, it ain't mine anyway. I'm the seller. But if I'm the buyer and I am taking over this property, remember the fleas come with the dog, I better know if there are liens attached to this property. As a matter of fact, if I'm the buyer, I'm going to insist that all the liens get satisfied before I close. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's one of the things we have to get ourselves in the right mindset of understanding how we build ourselves up to a closing, because these liens are attached to the property. Now, specific liens can be voluntary, meaning that the owner of the property does it because they want to. They pledge, they promise the property as collateral because they want to. Or they can be involuntary. What do you think the most common example of a voluntary specific lien?
Someone needs to get something, like buy something, and so they want to like pay off something, so they get money, and then they put their house up for it.
Well, that's an example. I wouldn't say it's the most common example. What's that? What do you think the most?
Mortgage.
I think I heard
Mortgage loan. Mortgage.
the mortgage loan itself. Most people don't have enough funds to purchase a property without what?
A mortgage.
A mortgage loan.
Well, guess what promise they have to make to the lender in order for the lender to lend them the money in the first place?
The house is collateral.
They promise the property as collateral. Now, I want to walk you through that, because mentally in your mind, you need to understand how this process is gonna flow. Let's say Tasha has a property she wants to sell, and Joy is buying it from her. Now, Tasha has $200,000 in mortgage debt on the property. Okay? She has a mortgage note for $200,000 that she owes on the property. Joy is paying her $300,000 for the property, but she's borrowing $250,000 from her bank. Could that be a reasonable transaction right there?
Yes.
Is that a real world example?
Yes.
Okay. So Tasha doesn't care about Joy and her loan, but Joy cares about Tasha and her loan, correct?
Yeah.
Because here's what could happen. If Tasha doesn't pay off that $200,000, if Joy just hands Tasha $300,000, Tasha's gonna run off to Barbados somewhere.
Just like selling a Rubin.
Take me.
And she can't pay off that $200,000 in mortgage debt because she doesn't care. Let them come for the property. That's for Joy to work. And all of a sudden, Joy doesn't owe $250,000 that she just borrowed against her property. She owes $450,000 because she owes the $200,000 that Tasha borrowed plus the $250,000 she just borrowed. She got a problem.
Wow.
Yeah, she got a problem,
right?
Right.
So here's what Joy is going to say. Tasha, I'm not going to give you any money now until you pay this note off. But that creates a problem. Tasha doesn't have $200,000 shoved under her mattress somewhere to pay this note off. Do you, Tasha?
I could, but I'd rather run it through the attorney and do it in our closing.
There you go. That's why we hire an attorney. Because Joy's not going to give Tasha the money directly. Who's Joy going to give it to?
The
Attorney.
The attorney. But here's the problem. Joy doesn't have the money to give the attorney either. Because Joy's doing what?
Borrowing
She's
from the
loaning
bank.
it from, borrowing
She's
from the bank.
In
Joy
Barbados.
the bank. So she's going to go to the bank and say, now give me $250,000 so I can give it to these people so I can buy the house, and then I'll give you collateral in the house. Guess what? The bank doesn't trust Joy any more than Joy trusts Tasha. The bank's going to give the money to.
The bank. I mean, they're giving it to the attorney and the trust
They're
account.
going to give it to the attorney. Everybody trusts the closing attorney in this deal. Because Joy's lender is going to give that loan, even though Joy's borrowing it, they're not going to give it to her. They're going to give it to the closing attorney. And they're going to say, here's $250,000 of our loan, but you only use it under one condition.
Out of house.
That Joy owns the house and she gives us collateral in the house. Does that make sense for everybody?
It does.
Yep.
And Joy's going to say to the closing attorney, now, my bank's sending you some money, but don't you dare give that money to this seller until the seller has paid off their what?
Mortgage.
Their mortgage. And Tasha's going to say, well, I don't have the money to pay off the mortgage. And the closing attorney's going to say, no problem. Tell you what I'm going to do. I've got the money from Joy's lender right here. I'm gonna take that, it's $250,000, and I'm gonna pay off the $200,000 you owe, Tasha,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna give you the $50,000 difference. Does that sound good to you, Tasha?
No,
It
because
does.
you're supposed to give me $300,000 for my property.
Oh, you want the other $50,000?
I want other 100,000.
You want all. So where's the other 50 got to come from?
Her pocket, her cash that she has, she's got to give that to the attorney.
Well, and so Joy's not gonna give that money to Tasha either, because Joy don't trust Tasha. Guess who Joy's gonna give money to?
My attorney.
Attorney.
The closing attorney. See, the closing attorney's gonna get all the money. The
Mhm.
closing attorney's gonna get $50,000 from Joy and $250 from Joy's lender. And then once they got all that money in the pot, they're gonna start divvying it up. And they're gonna say, okay, we're sending $200,000 to Tasha's lender. Boom, debt paid off. That makes sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So now Tasha owns the property how?
Free and clear.
Free and clear. Everybody with me on that?
Yeah.
For one, it might only last 30 seconds, but for 30 seconds, after that note gets paid off, Tasha owns that property free and clear. Is everybody with me on that?
Yes.
And so now it's time to transfer that property from Tasha to who?
Joy.
To Joy. Now, for one glorious moment, it might only last 30 seconds, but now how does Joy own that property?
Free and clear.
Free and clear, because Tasha just sold it to her. Now, so now here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna give Tasha, remember, she's owed another $100,000, right? Because she was paying her $300. The attorney used $200 of it to pay off the debt. Here's your $100,000. Get out of our face. We're done with you.
Amen. I'll take my 100,000 and go. Ding ding.
Now we still got a problem. The closing attorney promised the lender they wouldn't use their money unless they gave them what?
Lateral.
Collateral. So the next thing the closing attorney is going to do before they give Joy the keys to that property, before they go and record that deed showing that Joy owns the property, is they're going to file a lien against the property. So what they did was they satisfied one lien, Tasha's lien, they transferred ownership, and then they filed a brand new lien all at one time.
Not gonna eat those fries, just wasting food.
And that's how the
You don't want them,
transaction.
cause they cold. Eat the fries.
Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so when we talk about these specific liens and mortgages, that's how that plays out. Okay, and that all happens at the county courthouse in the county where the property is located. Doesn't matter where you meet for the closing, the settlement. It's the county where the property is located. So we could do a closing for a property in Wake County over in Chapel Hill, which is in Orange County. But where we're gonna have to, somebody's gonna have to go where to record those documents?
That county.
Wake County.
Wake County Courthouse. All right. So it doesn't matter where you meet. You can meet anywhere you want. Meet in the moon if you want to, but those documents have to be recorded in the courthouse where the property is located. Okay. All right. Another type of a voluntary lien, one that the owner takes on willingly, is something called a mechanic's lien. Sometimes on the test, these are called materialman's liens. I want you to write that in your notes. It means the same thing. Mechanic or material man. The reason it's mechanic or materialman is because it's for work or material. It's a lien that's put against the property for either work done or for materials that are provided to the property, but they haven't been what?
Paid for.
They haven't been paid for.
And we cannot take it back. I'm
That's
an
right.
electrician. Once you wire a house, if they don't pay you, I'm not allowed to go in there and strip the panel out.
That's it. There you go. And so this is a protection for contractors. This is a protection for vendors who do work on property but don't get paid. Rather than them going and doing crazy things like ripping the panel box,
Yep.
wiring out the house, what they have the ability to do is go to the county courthouse in the county where the property is located and file a lien against the property. Now, what did we say was the purpose of a lien? Be able to do what if you need to?
Close.
Foreclose. Again, A lien is the right to foreclose. So put that together. Somebody installs a deck on your house and you don't pay for the deck. Can that person, handyman, contractor, whatever they are, foreclose on your property?
Yes.
Yes, if there was a contract in the beginning.
If there was a contract, let's say you had a written contract with them, they have a signed contract, you did the work. Can they foreclose on your property?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the whole purpose of a mechanic's lien. So does that make sense for everybody?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to pay vendors who do work on property. Now, this is something you need to pay attention to, not only for the test. And by the way, this is gonna, the next up, this page is national. Okay, this slide is national. This is just generic information about mechanics liens. Everything else that we're about to talk about with mechanics liens is going to be North Carolina specific. Okay. All right. So with the mechanics liens, I tried to remind you of that with the North Carolina flag down there in the corner. With mechanics liens, these are North Carolina specific rules about how long the vendor has to file the lien against the property and how long they have to take action. Okay, there's time limits here. Everybody understand what we're talking about? The vendor, they can't just pop up, 3 years later and say, by the way, you never paid me for that work, I'm filing a lien against your house. It doesn't work that way. They have time limits for filing these liens. The first time limit you need to be aware of in North Carolina is that they have 120 days after they what?
Finish.
After they finish doing the work. 120 days after they finish doing the work. Not 180, not 300, not 30. Up to a maximum of 120 days after they finish doing work on the property. Now, if they're only providing materials, it would be 120 days after they did what?
Left the material.
Dropped off the material.
Exactly right. If it's actual work, it would be 120 days from the date they finished. That's how. What if they wait 150 days? Do you still owe them the money?
No.
You owe them the money,
But they
but they
can't
can't what?
file the lien.
They can't file a lien. Does that make sense for everybody?
Can you say that again? A lot of people were talking at the same time.
Yeah. If the vendor waits more than 120 days, the homeowner, the property owner still owes the money. So let's say it's been 150 days, it's been 5 months, and the HVAC company's, trying to collect. You still owe them the money. They can take you to court, they can sue you, but what they can't do is file a lien against the property. So if you're the vendor, what's the smart thing to do? If you're getting to be, it's 90 days and they haven't paid you, what should you probably be doing?
File a lien.
Going down to the courthouse and filing this lien. Because if you wait more than 120 days, you're not going to be able to do it. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let's talk about enforcing the lien. First of all, what does enforcing a lien mean? What is the magic word?
Foreclosing.
Foreclosing. They have 180 days after finishing the work to foreclose on the property. So how long do they have to file the lien?
120.
20 after they finish the work. How long do they have to foreclose? 180 after the 120 or after they finish the work?
After
After they finish the work. So if they waited 120 days to file the lien, how long do they have to foreclose?
60 days.
60 days. That's it. Does that make sense? The clocks are running at the same time. It's a total of 180 days they have to foreclose on the property. They have to file the lien within 120. They have to foreclose within 180.
I have a
But
question.
what's the process of them doing that? Like, is it?
So does this mean
I think it's like the bank doing it. Is it like the?
It's exactly the same as it would be for a bank. You either yourself go or have an attorney go down to the courthouse, file the paperwork against the property showing the lien, and then go file the paperwork beginning the foreclosure process. It works exactly the same as a bank foreclosure.
And how does the tradesman or whoever prove the last day they were on the job? With just one word against another?
They just have to submit documentation showing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Travis, I have a question. So it seems to me there's a difference between furnishing labor and materials and finishing the job. So you could be sort of guessing that they're not going to pay and you're hedging your bets and you go ahead and file a lien. But are you saying you can file a lien just from the last furnishing of the labor and materials or when the job is finished?
From the last, so if you're going to file a lien, you have to stop work. So if you
you're done. You're done. Yeah. Okay.
So let's say, for example, it was a big job and they were supposed to pay you in 3 installments.
Yeah.
And they missed the first installment, but you keep working. And it gets time for the second installment and they don't pay you again. You could stop work right there. And then your 120-day clock would start to tick from the moment you stopped work. It's from the last time you were on the property. So think about the last time you were on the property, working on the property, it's 120 days past that point.
So then 60 days after that, they can foreclose?
They can
Oh, wow.
anytime up to 180 days after they stop working on the property.
I have a question.
And it goes concurrent with the 120, right?
The two
like your 120.
You're trying to do what I don't want you to do. Don't make them related to one another. It's a jumping, they both start from the same time. One lasts 120 days, the other lasts 180 days. Okay?
I have a question.
Yep.
You said that a lien is appurtenant.
Yep.
So when you put a lien on a person, like you're going, it still stays with the land?
You're not putting the lien on the person, you're putting the lien on the land.
Okay, all right.
Yep. The lien is attached to the land, not the person. Go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, okay. So if the mechanic, if they don't file their lien within 120 days on the property, but they still want to get paid, is that now a general lien on the?
It won't automatically become a general lien. They would have to sue. A court could decide whether to create a general lien or not.
And then it makes it a general lien on the person, not the property.
Person, not the property. But that's a much harder route to go. Whereas with the specific lien, the mechanic's lien, it's automatic. They can just go and then do it. They don't have to worry about a court date. They don't have to worry about a lawsuit. They don't have to worry about any of that.
Okay.
And Travis, I'm like really confused on something. So let's say for an HVAC system,
yep.
You know, a lot of companies will allow you to make like payments or installments for it, or they put you on some kind of plan. Cause I mean, that's like $5,000-$6,000, like right out of pocket. A lot of people can't do that. So how does that work with, you know, them putting a lien on your property? Like, do you have a certain amount of days or a time period?
They're gonna put the lien on there. They can put the lien. This is the deadline by which they must put the lien. If you haven't paid, and if you're making them payments, you haven't paid. So guess what they're gonna do? They're gonna place the lien against the property.
Gotcha. Okay.
So while you're making those payments, the lien's gonna be there. Most likely, if they're smart.
That's in 120 days.
That's the deadline for doing that is 120 days. They can do it on day one. Can they matter of fact, could they place the lien before they even finish the job?
Technically, yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't say when it's too early to place the lien. It says they can't place the lien any later than 120 days after they stop working on the property. Does that make sense? There's no such thing as too early to place the lien. Matter of fact, they could put the lien before they even do the work.
Do they have to let you know they're placing a lien?
you have to give them permission to place the lien when you by signing a contract agreeing to pay for the work.
That's interesting.
When you
Wow.
sign a contract agreeing to pay for the work, you are giving. Why do you think? How many of you have ever had somebody come to your door like trying to sell vinyl siding or windows or something?
Oh
like
yeah.
that? Who do they always ask for?
The homeowner.
Can I talk to the homeowner? Are you the owner of the property?
Oh, that's why.
They need an agreement from the owner in order to have the ability to place this lien.
But when the lien is placed, is the homeowner notified?
Oh yes, absolutely. Property owners are always going to be notified when a lien is filed against their property. The courthouse is going to send a copy of the lien itself to the owner's address that's on file.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's placed in the courthouse, and then even if they place the lien on when you start the contract, once you pay them in completion, then they file another paper in the courthouse saying that it's been satisfied.
That's right. They're satisfying or canceling the lien. Now, just because vendors have the ability to do this does not mean they want to. The courthouse doesn't do anything for free. There's going to be a cost associated with filing this lien. There's going to be a cost associated with canceling this lien. So most of them are going to try to collect on their own for a certain period of time before they go file the lien. Like I said, you could file the lien on day one, but most of them won't do that. Most of them are going to bill you. They're going to wait. Most of them are going to try to wait till it's almost 120 days. They're going to file the lien as a last resort because they don't want to pay that money. It's going to cost them a couple $100s to go down to the courthouse and file this lien. So they don't want to do that. They're doing this as a last resort to protect themselves and make sure they get paid.
And in case of a foreclosure, they're the last ones to get paid after the state and the lenders.
Right. We're going to talk about the order of distribution of money in a foreclosure. They'd be last in line. Here's what they're hoping. Most mechanics are never going to foreclose. Your HVAC company, just because they have the right to foreclose doesn't mean they are. How long do liens last? They're appurtenant. So how long do they last?
Forever.
Forever. So back to our previous example with Tasha selling her property to Joy. Joy has found that Tasha owes $200,000 to her bank, but she also owes $5,000 to the HVAC company. What do you think Joy is going to say to Tasha? Oh, I'll buy your house for $300,000, but not unless you do what?
Pay your debt.
Unless you pay off the bank and this HVAC company. And so Joy's going to tell the closing attorney, now, that's fine. You give her the money that's left over, but you make sure you pay that bank and you pay that HVAC company first.
So wouldn't that be included in their title insurance? If it should pop up, somebody missed it, doesn't the title insurance cover that?
Right. That's why you buy title insurance, so in case something like that gets missed.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Okay. So that's one. That's why we file these liens. Basically, the vendors are just putting a placeholder. They're saying, okay, fine, don't pay me, but you're gonna sell this thing sooner or later. When you do, I'm getting.
And you're gonna pay it
because I guarantee you the person buying the property from you is not going to buy it from you unless you pay this off.
So if a house goes into foreclosure and you go and let's say you're going to purchase that home like from the bank, then are you going to see like all the debt that is attached to that?
I have to interrupt you, Brittany. You can't. You don't purchase a house in foreclosure from the bank. Period.
Okay.
It's purchased from a trustee.
Okay.
Talk about that. The bank doesn't own the property.
Just kidding. My bad.
No, I know. Yeah, that's the common misconception, but I need to nip it. So what was the rest of the question?
So like if you purchase that house from that trustee, then do you get all of that debt that was associated with that land?
Foreclosure is a wiping of the slate.
Wipe slate free. Okay.
Foreclosure wipes the slate clean. The trustee's job is to get as much money as they can for the property and pay off as many of the debts as possible. But the person who that's the advantage of buying something at a foreclosure sale. When you buy it at a foreclosure sale, it comes free of liens. The foreclosure has cleared the liens away.
So is that typically a good thing to do then?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you want the liens cleared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's why otherwise you'd have properties that would never get sold because they'd be so they'd be so upside down, nobody would ever buy them because they would still have all this debt attached to them and it would be frozen. So.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so could the trustee be the bank, or is the trustee who's the trustee?
Trustee is, we're gonna talk about that when we get to chapter 14. Let's hold
Okay.
off.
Okay.
But basically, the trustee is an attorney who's been hired by the lien holder, which is usually the bank.
The bank, okay.
To represent their interest. And so the trustee is taking the property on behalf of the bank and selling it, but it's not the bank selling the property.
And Travis, the trustee has to actually be appointed to be a trustee, correct?
Correct.
You can't just be like, oh, I'm gonna be a trustee. No,
they're appointed. They're appointed by the borrower and the lender at the time they take out the loan. Yeah. They decide on who the trustee is going to be. Okay? All right. Last thing you need to know about mechanics liens in North Carolina is that they're the only liens that aren't paid specifically in the order they are recorded. Here's what I mean. Think of a buffet line. I want you to envision a buffet line. But in this buffet, there's one catch about this buffet. It ain't like the Golden Corral. They put food out one time and one time only. Do you want to be at the front of the line or do you want to be at the back of the line?
Front.
The front.
You want to be at the front of that line because if you're at the back of the line, what chance do you take?
They're going to run out.
Something left.
Run out. That's what a foreclosure looks like. Foreclosure is a buffet line, except they only put food out there one time, and the food is the money. And who gets paid is going to largely be a function of where they are in line. Does that make sense for everybody?
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to be at the front of that line. Most liens, if there are what are multiple liens of the same type, if there's two mortgages, for example, some properties have two mortgages on. How do we decide which mortgage gets paid first? Well, we look at who got to the courthouse first, who recorded their lien first. If you have two mortgages, which one are we going to pay first?
The oldest one.
The oldest one, the one who recorded their lien first. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
If we have two property tax liens, which ones are we going to pay first?
The oldest.
The ones that's recorded
first.
Every lien works that way except mechanics liens. If we have two mechanics liens or three mechanics liens, we do not pay them in the order they were recorded. We pay them in the order they began work on the property. So it doesn't matter who records their lien first. What matters is who started work first. So here's what I mean. Imagine subcontractors building a house. You've got your concrete subcontractor, you got your framer, you got your electrician, you got your plumber. Who's going to start work first?
Concrete.
You got to pour the footers.
Yeah.
First part of the house, pour the footers, right? Who's going to be working there last of that group?
Finishers.
Of that group I gave you, concrete, framer, electric, plumber. Who's going to be working last?
The plumbers and electrician.
Concrete.
Framer.
Concrete. Guess what they're going to do very last, so they don't tear it up?
Fill everything in. Driveway.
Driveway is the last thing they do because they don't want work trucks parking on it, cracking it. They want it pretty, not stained. So that concrete vendor probably works first and last on that property. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So they may be the very last one to file their lien because the framer, they've been finished for 2 months and they still haven't got paid. So they filed their lien and that concrete guy comes and files his lien. Well, he filed it 2 months later, but he's not going to get paid last because he started work what?
First.
They pay mechanics liens in the order of when they began work. That's how they establish the order. So when you file a mechanics lien, what do you think? What do you think 2 dates they want to know when you go to the courthouse to file a mechanics lien? When did you what?
Start.
When did you
Finish.
Those are the 2 dates they want to know when you file a mechanics lien. They want to know when you finish to make sure you're within the 120 days. And they want to know when you started so they can get you paid in the right order. That makes sense for everybody? We're good on the mechanics lien. Okay, good. So, as I mentioned, we pay liens generally in the order they are recorded at the county courthouse. That order of processing them. And recording is a fancy word. Sometimes I forget I need to define things that I don't think I necessarily need to define. I've said this word recording a lot. Some of you may not know what that means, and that's okay. It's my fault for not defining it. Recording sounds fancy. Let me tell you what recording is. Paying them to scan a document. That's what recording is.
Mm-hmm.
You go to the courthouse and you hand them a document, and they put it on a scanner, and they save a copy of it, and they say that'll be $42 per page. Thank you for your business. That's what recording is. Now, here's the advantage of that. Who can now see that document?
The public.
The public. Anybody. Everybody. So documents that impact property are almost always recorded at the county courthouse so the whole public can see them. Because when Joy's getting ready to buy that property, doesn't she need to know that there's a lien against the property that Tasha has for not paying that HVAC contractor?
Yes.
And the best way to make sure she knows that lien exists is to say to that contractor, well, if you file a lien against that property, you got to record that lien at the county courthouse so Joy can find it if and when she wants to buy it. Is everybody following me on that?
Mm-hmm.
That's what recording is all about. So liens are mostly paid, and we call this priority, in the order they're recorded, except the state has said some liens are more important than others. The state has set up a pecking order. The state has picked favorites. Here's why that's important. Remember I told you about that buffet line. Every foreclosure, every sale really is a buffet line. The good news is that in most sales, there's enough food on the buffet. In fact, there's food left over at the end. Who takes all the leftovers at the end? Who takes all the leftover money in a normal sale? Who gets it at the end?
Right.
The leftover money. After all the debts are paid, who gets it in a sale transaction normally?
The seller?
The
owner.
The seller does. Well, here's what I'm here to tell you. A foreclosure is just a sale. It's just like any other sale, except instead of the owner deciding they wanted to sell the property, somebody forced them to sell the property to pay off debts. Are you following me on that? Does that mentally make sense for you?
Mm-hmm.
Let me put it to you another way. If you were the owner of the property and you owed a bunch of money, you had debt, but the property was worth more than the debt, and somebody was threatening you saying, if you don't pay us, we're going to foreclose on your property, what would you probably do if the property was worth more than the debt? What would you probably do?
Sell it.
You'd sell it because you know you would get to keep the money that was what?
Left over.
Left over. So what does that tell you about the vast majority of properties that are foreclosed? Is there going to be enough food on the book?
No.
No.
Underwater.
Because if there was enough meat on them bones,
They'd
would
sell
have
it.
sold it in the first place. It never would have made it to foreclosure. Is that making sense for y'all?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
It only gets to foreclosure because it wasn't worth enough to pay off the debt in the first place. Otherwise, they would just sold the thing. Okay? So this pecking order becomes super important in foreclosure sales because you don't want to be where?
At the end.
At the end.
You don't want to be at the back because they're going to run out of money. You're going to be hungry. Okay? And so let's talk about the priority that the state has. Now, if you were the state of North Carolina and you were setting up the pecking order for how money was going to get distributed in a transaction, who would you put first?
Yourself.
The state.
Yourself. And that's exactly what they did. If you look at this pecking order, the first liens that are going to get satisfied are the real property taxes and those special assessments. Remember, we talked about a special assessment yesterday. We said, like, if the city comes in and puts sidewalks on your property, or if they run water and sewer out of your property, but they make you pay for it as an improvement to the property, well, that becomes a lien against the property. And that's the top category of stuff that gets paid first. So if the property gets sold for any reason, whether the seller's selling it themselves or a foreclosure happens, what's the first liens that are going to get paid?
Property tax.
The general.
Special assessments. Is everybody okay on that?
Yes.
Once those are paid, and assuming there's still money left over, that could be a big assumption, but assuming there's money left over, once those taxes and special assessments are paid, then we get to mortgages. And what does it say about mortgages? What order are they going to get paid in?
Order they're recorded.
The order they are recorded in. Everybody okay with that? Because some people have 2 mortgages or 3 mortgages. Some people have a primary mortgage and a home equity line. I have that. I have a primary mortgage and I have a home equity line. How many of you have something like that?
I did until I paid the equity line off.
even if you paid it off, it might still be open, right? You still might have it open. But
right.
Here's the point. If and when I sell my property, what's the first debt that's going to get paid if it hasn't already been paid for the year?
The mortgage. Property tax.
Property taxes, right? First thing got to be paid by law. Any special assessments got to be paid by law. And then we get to the mortgages. And in what order are we going to pay the home equity line first? Are we going to pay the primary mortgage first? Well, the answer is we're going to look at the one that was what?
Recorded first.
Recorded first. Whichever one was recorded first, we're going to pay first. I think some people have this perception, oh, you're going to pay the biggest one first. No, you're going to pay the one that was recorded first. Whichever one's older. It's like seniority. That one gets paid first. Okay?
I got confused on something. When you asked about which one was being paid first, a lot of people said general liens, but that's not true, is it?
No. These are all specific liens.
Okay. Because I heard some people say general, and I didn't think that was right. So
I did not hear that. I apologize. But yeah, no. These are all specific liens. Property only deals with specific liens. Okay. Right. Real property. Now, assuming we've paid off the taxes, the special assessments, and all the mortgages, we only move down to this next level if there's still what left?
The money.
If there's still money. Look who's last in line.
Mechanics.
The mechanics. And this is why most of them, even when they file the lien, don't bother to try to foreclose. Because here's what this means, and this is hard for some people to wrap their mind around. Cole said, electricians. Let's say Cole goes and does electrical work at a property and doesn't get paid. So we've got this electrical work that doesn't get paid for. Can Cole file a mechanics lien against the property?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Cole can file a mechanics lien against the property and does. Files it with 120 days. Can Cole foreclose on the property?
Yes.
Yes, as long as it's done within 180 days after the work was finished. Everybody following me so far?
Mm-hmm.
So now Cole has foreclosed on the property. Is that going to cost some money? First of all, it costs money to file the lien.
Yes.
Right. You probably had to pay who to do it for you?
Attorney.
Is it going to cost some money to start the foreclosure process?
Yes.
You're probably going to have to pay who to do it for you?
Lawyer.
An attorney, right? So now we've paid an attorney to file the lien. We've paid an attorney to process the foreclosure. maybe we spent $3,000-4,000 foreclosing on this thing. The attorney has to take the property and sell it. They don't give the property to Cole because Cole foreclosed. A foreclosure is not a taking of the property. A foreclosure is a sale of the property. Is everybody following me on this thing?
Mm-hmm.
So we pay that attorney to foreclose on the property. The attorney takes it and sells it at a foreclosure auction, because every property that's foreclosed gets sold at a foreclosure auction. And the auction doesn't even bring enough money to pay off all the mortgage debt. It is too late for Cole to back up. Cole spent $5,000 foreclosing on this thing. And all the money went where?
To the mortgage.
Taxes and mortgage.
The bank for the mortgage. How much did Cole get out of this thing?
Money they. Okay.
Cole got nothing.
Wow.
And the
He lost
lien
money.
that Cole did have on the property is now what?
Gone.
$5,000
because the foreclosure cleared out the lien.
Mm-hmm.
And for that reason, very few mechanics actually foreclose on property. What they will actually do is just wait until the owner themselves decides to what?
Pay them.
No.
To sell it down the road.
Right.
They'll wait until that owner decides to sell it, because they don't even have to find you when you get ready to sell your property, because that buyer is going to say, I'm not buying it till you pay them off. They will come find you to pay you. They'll be like, hey, remember me? I owe you $5,000 from like 12 years ago. Well, here's your money because I need to sell my house. They'll find you. And that's the value of filing a mechanic's lien.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Everybody
Yes.
following on that? Okay. Other types of encumbrances or deed restrictions, which we're going to talk about a lot in chapter 6. I'm not going to get into now, but things like covenants are an example of encumbrances you might deal with. Deed restrictions, they restrict what you can and cannot do with the property. Now, here's what I want to do. I know it's kind of we haven't been going that long, but I want to take a break before we get into easements, because easements tend to be a little bit tricky for folks. So let's take like a 5-minute break, hit the restroom if you need to. It's 2:43. Let's be back at 2:50. And then we're going to hit easements, which is the next category of encumbrances. Okay.
Travis, I know everybody's logging out, but I'm just thinking, wouldn't a judgment also be a part of the liens and encumbrance that will be?
A judgment is a personal lien. That's a general.
Right.
And so it could impact the property at some point, but it's not tied directly to the property. It's tied to the person.
Okay. I was thinking about that for an individual that had a judgment, but they died, and then the heirs tried to sell the property.
Mm-hmm.
And when they tried to sell the property, the closing attorney said that they had to pay off that judgment.
Right. And that would have been the same. Here's the difference. That would have been the same if they had sold their car, or if they had sold their furniture, or if they had sold their clothes, or because that judgment impacts all assets that person owned, not just the property.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I have a question.
There we go. All right.
It's pouring down outside.
There we go. All right, so when we left off, we talked about some types of encumbrances, specifically liens. Another encumbrance or limitation that this is from this chapter. From this chapter, know what a specific lien is. Know what lien priority is and what order things get paid in. Know easements. You're going to see test questions about easements. And this is one of those rare occurrences where I can say to you, the test actually is testing you on what it needs to test you on, because you need to know these in the real world. You need to understand how easements work. in the real world, and what an easement is and why it exists and when it's used and all that good stuff. You need to know all that because it's going to be super important. So an easement is when some person or company, it can be a person or a company, has the right, not the permission. Permission is a different thing. You can always get permit. If, for example, if Ethan owns a piece of property, can he give me permission to be on his property?
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Mm-hmm.
But permission, just like it can be given, can also be what?
Taken away.
It can be taken away. That's the problem with permission. See, let me give you a problem. I'm the power company, and I need to run my power lines across your property so that I can run power not only to your property, to your home, but to all your neighbors' property who are further down the street than you. Is everybody following me on that thought process?
Yes.
And the only way I can get power all the way down the street is if we go across your property. So I can go to Ethan and I can say, Ethan, can we please have permission to put our power lines across your property? And he might say, yeah, sure. And that's all wonderful until 10 years down the road, he changes his mind. And he says, no, I've changed my mind. You got to move your power cables off of my property. Is that going to be a problem for the power company?
Mm-hmm.
So permission's not enough. We need something more permanent than that. We need something that once it's in place, the property owner can't do what?
Take it away.
Can't change their mind. And that's called an easement. An easement is permanent permission to access property that belongs to someone else. Now, it's not permission for everybody to access that property. It's permission for that one specific company or person or piece of property or whatever. We call it, every easement has what's called a beneficiary. The beneficiary, if we're talking about Ethan's property and the power company, who would be the beneficiary of the easement? Who benefits from the easement? Is it Ethan whose property is being used, or is it the power company who's taking advantage of Ethan's property?
Power company.
The power company is the beneficiary of the easement. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yeah.
Yes.
So an easement is like a permanent version of permission. Now here's why it's really important. Not only does Ethan have to honor that permission, but guess who else has to honor that permission?
Every owner that comes in the future.
Every other owner.
Yeah.
Everybody else who ever purchases that property down the road. That's the value of an easement. Once it's in place, not only does the current property owner have to honor it, but so does every subsequent property owner. It sits there, and when somebody purchases the property, just like they understand they have to follow the covenants, they also understand they have to follow the easements. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
So,
Would an easement be considered a appurtenant because it stays with the land?
good question. Hang on to it for just a second. Would an easement be considered an appurtenance?
Yes.
Hold it for just 1 second, because we're right there. Like you right on time with that question, but hold it for just a second. Because look at the two types of easements, Cassie. Look at the first category of easements. They are called what?
Appurtenant easements.
Appurtenant easements. And so the answer to your question is some easements are appurtenant, meaning they last how long?
Forever.
Forever. They stay there forever. They never go away. Now,
I have an example of this. My house that I just sold in Red Oak, Nash County, of course, they had to come talk to me, had to sign all the papers, but that property now has an appurtenant easement because the county water needed a right of easement to put some big thing in my front yard underground. and then they put everything back like it was. So it'll be there forever.
Now, there is another category of easements, and I'm going to tell you, because y'all are smart people, I'm going to let you answer this for yourself. What do you think the difference is going to be? We got one category of easements that never go away. What do you think the other easements are going to be? Easements that do what?
Will go away
at
at
the
some point.
time.
It's not
Happens in the land.
Away at some
Time.
point.
When the dies.
Well, we're going to talk about when that is, and that's exactly right. But here's the big difference between the two. One group of easements goes away, and one what?
It's forever.
It's forever.
Is forever. Let me tell you why that is, and then you tell me which is which. I told you every easement had a beneficiary, right? Remember that from just a second ago?
Yep.
I'm going to make a statement now, and I want you to think about it for a second. Easements, all easements, last until the beneficiary dies or goes out of business. All easements last until the beneficiary dies or goes out of business. Is everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now think about an appurtenant easement. How long do we say that lasts?
Forever.
Ever.
But I just told you that all easements, including appurtenant easements, only last as long as the beneficiary lasts. How could it be? How could both of those statements be true at the same time? How could appurtenant easements last forever, but I'm saying they end when the beneficiary ends? What's the one thing that lasts forever?
The land.
Land. So what is the beneficiary of an appurtenant easement?
The land.
Land. If you have an easement where a piece of property has an easement over another piece of property, that's an appurtenant easement. And how long is it going to last?
Forever.
Forever. If you have an easement where a person or a company has an easement over a piece of property, how long is that easement going to last? Until they die, or the company what?
Goes out of business.
Goes out of business. We call the ones that benefit a piece of land an appurtenant easement. We call the other ones what?
Easement and growth.
Easement and growth.
That's the difference between the two. An appurtenant easement. Because every easement has a piece of property that's being taken advantage of. I used an example earlier, and I said, what about the power company running across somebody's land? You know, they're running their power cables across somebody's land. Isn't that property being used by the power company?
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
We call the property that's being used the Servient property. Candace, is it your birthday?
Oh no, my birthday was on the 26th, and I just have my balloons and flowers still on the
Okay.
Someone had asked me that earlier.
Happy belated birthday.
Oh, thank you.
When was the 25th?
Well, happy belated birthday to you too. There you go. All you June babies.
My birthday's on Friday.
Ooh, happy early birthday.
To you. There you go.
That's why I'm driving right now. I had to get cupcakes for my daughter. She's 16 today.
Oh,
I'm making cupcakes for myself.
You see what you started?
Right. And that just, I forgot they were there. Yeah.
But, all right, so we've got a Servient property. Every easement has a Servient property. That's the property being used. That's where the easement is located. The easement is across the property being used. Because remember, what is an easement? It's the right to do what?
Use
somebody else's property. So the Servient property, think of the word Servient. It means you're being taken advantage of. Like, that's what Servient means. You're being taken advantage of. So a Servient property is being taken advantage of. Every easement has a Servient property. Appurtenant easements don't involve just one piece of property though. Appurtenant easements involve two pieces of property. If one is servient and being taken advantage of, what do you think the other one might be called?
Dominant.
The dominant one.
The dominant property. And the dominant property is the one that takes advantage. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yeah.
Yes.
The dominant property is the one that takes advantage, the one that uses the other. That's the dominant property. So I want to do this and see. Now I'm going to tell you my artistic skills are sorely lacking here, but let me see if I can do a white screen real quick so I can show you something. Let's say we've got a road right here, and we got a driveway that comes off of the road, but we have 4 houses that have been built along this driveway. Everybody with me so far?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Now, see if I can change colors here. With these 4 houses, we got lot number 1, lot number 2, lot number 3, and lot number 4. I bought lot number 4. Or actually, I bought lot number 2. This is my house right here. I need to get into my driveway every day. What's the only way for me to get there from the road?
Drive across number 1's property.
I got to drive across. I got to turn in off the road and drive from here to here, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Does everybody agree with that?
Yes.
But the problem I have is that, I'm going to change colors again here, or try to. Oops, I'm going to do that. This is why I hate drawing in PowerPoint. Go back to the screen. Oh, stupid thing.
Uh-oh.
Stupid thing. Let me do this. I can do it better this way. I should have not tried to draw it in PowerPoint. Draw it right here. I'll share this again. Give me a second. Here we go. Share. And right there. All right. So here's our highway. And we've got lots right here. Lot number 1, lot number 2, lot number 3, and lot number 4. And here's our homes. Okay. And then we said there was a driveway that comes off of the highway right here. And lot 1, 2, 3, 4. And we said we were buying lot number 2, so we need to get here. And the only way to get there is to come and drive across lot number 1. Everybody with me on that? The problem is I don't have the right to drive across lot number 1.
The street gives you the easement.
I need an easement.
Yeah.
Everybody with me on that?
Mm-hmm.
Does lot number 1 have to give me an easement?
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would they have to give me an easement?
Right to access.
The right to access.
It's not their fault I don't have access.
Right.
It would come from the city.
Because when they bought the house, they signed an agreement, maybe.
Would number 1 be giving the easement?
Number 1 would be given the easement. Let me show you something. Let me give you a little look back in time.
To be one big land.
Same, who said that?
Me.
Who said, oh my goodness, what a great comment. Didn't this used to just be
One parcel.
Yeah,
one big parcel of land at some point?
Yes.
It did. And at some point, the person who owned that one big parcel of land decided to do what?
Subdivide it.
Subdivide it so they could sell it as 4 individual lots. And then they found out that they could only have one driveway. And they said, oh, well, that's no problem for lot number 1. But that is a problem for lot number 2, lot number 3, and lot number 4. Does everybody agree with that?
Yes.
So when they created this subdivision, they also created, because remember, they own all, how many lots do they own at that point in time?
One.
They own all 4 of them, because they own the big piece of land and they're dividing it into 4 what? Well, if they own all 4, can they create whatever easements they want to?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. And so here's what they're going to do. They're going to say, okay, lot number 2, we're going to give you an easement right there. So that now you have the right to drive from the highway right across lot number 1 and boom, you're home. Does that make sense for everybody? So that fixes the problem for lot number 2, does it not?
Yes.
Everybody with me on that? This is an appurtenant easement. How many pieces of property did it involve?
2.
2, right? Okay. You notice they're side by side? We said there's always a servient property. The servient property is where the easement is located. So which one is servient?
Number 1.
And which one is dominant?
2.
Number 2.
Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yes.
Still got a problem though.
I was about to say 3 and 4, they have to have.
Yeah.
We got a problem for lot number 3, don't we?
Yeah.
So how do we fix lot number 3?
Continue on.
For the
with-
easement,
Easement on number 2.
Yeah.
We give them an easement across lot number 2.
But if the owner was the one big property, wouldn't they just, that they be servient and give dominant to 2, 3, and 4?
You can't do it that way. An appurtenant easement only involves how many pieces?
2 lots.
Oh, because after you
adjacent.
break it up and sell it, 2's got to be able to sell, 3's got to be able to, got it.
That's exactly right. You're breaking this thing up so it can be sold in individual pieces, right?
Yep.
So lot number 3 needs an easement across lot number what?
2.
Number 2. And once they, because here's the thing, once they get on lot number 2, they're home free because lot number 2 has an easement over lot number what?
1.
So as long as they have the legal right to travel across lot number 2, lot number 2 gives them the legal right to travel across lot number 1, which gets them back out to the road. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And we still ain't done. Guess what?
Number 4.
One
lot
more.
Number 4 needs an easement across lot number 3. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So would that mean that there's only one dominant in there and it'd be number 4?
So number 4 is indeed dominant. What's number 3?
Both.
Both dominant and servient.
Number 3 is servient to number 4.
And dominant to number 2.
And dominant
Number 2.
to number 2. That makes sense?
Yep.
Number 2 is dominant to lot number 1, but what?
Servient.
Servient to lot number 3. That's how you could string together easements. That's not one big easement, that's 3 easements. Now, let me ask you a question. When I first drew the picture, which lot looked like the worst lot of all?
4.
Which lot is the best lot of all?
1.
4. Because 4 is the only one who doesn't have to allow somebody else to what?
Interact.
It's their driveway.
Drive across their property. What if somebody from lot number 3 comes on lot number 4? What do we call that?
Trespassing.
Trespassing. Exactly right. What's the worst lot in here? One. Because the whole damn neighborhood drives across their property.
So this would be something like a dead end.
Probably, yeah. Okay, does that make sense?
Yep.
Yep. That is an appurtenant easement. Now, the reason it's appurtenant is because if you notice the beneficiary, the dominant thing is a piece of property. And since that dominant property will never go away, then the easement will never go away. So if I buy lot number 2, I'm always going to have the right to drive across lot number 1, but I'm also always going to have to give the right for lots 3 and 4 to drive across my property. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I have a question.
Yep.
I'm not sure if this has anything to do, it just kind of came to mind, but it might be not the right topic, but since you're talking about crossing over and someone mentioned a dead end, which came to mind, like a cul-de-sac, would that have anything to do with this or no?
Most likely not, because most likely with cul-de-sacs, you're not dealing, that's not private property, that's usually public property. It's usually like a state managed roadway. We're talking about, you know, the situation where this is actual private property that you're driving across.
Okay.
So then each of those properties have to maintain their own lot.
That's exactly right. So lot number 1 has to maintain all of lot number 1, including that section of the driveway, because it's on their property. Even though everybody else drives across it, lot number 1 has to maintain it. These situations, by the way, create nightmares for us. This is the kind of stuff that keeps us up late at night as real estate agents, because most people who create this mess don't create like a maintenance agreement for it, and that becomes a mess because number 1 doesn't want to do any road maintenance because they're like, driveway right there for me, I don't need it. But they're legally required to do it. And so you get in all kinds of issues.
So those are private, that's a private road.
That's private. It's not even a road. It's just an easement.
But if they want to pave it, then lot 1, 2, and 3 have to maintain that section.
Everybody has to maintain their own property. And they don't have to work with each other to do it, which is why this is not necessarily the smartest thing in the world. You end up with these situations more often than we'd like to see. But anytime you have 2 properties that are side by side, you could potentially have an appurtenant easement. I had one of these come up years ago. I sold a new construction property in North Raleigh, custom built home that's like $900,000 house. And it had a beautiful brick fence down the side of the driveway. And we did a survey when we bought I was representing the buyers and I had them do a survey. Now, when we do a survey, the number 1 thing we're looking for is where the boundaries are of the property to make sure that none of the improvements, what did we say improvements were?
Changes that affect property.
So things that have been built, right? So we want to make sure that none of the improvements extend across the property line. So give me examples of improvements that we might be worried would extend across the property line.
The brick wall.
That brick wall, the driveway, a shed, a fence, those kinds of things that people try to put right on the property line. Is everybody following me on that? And here's what we found. That brick wall, it encroached on the neighbor's property in 2 separate places. It had 2 curves in it, kind of like little, lazy curves. And in both of those curves, by about 6 inches, that brick wall went onto the neighbor's property. Here's the problem for my buyer. If they buy that house and their beautiful brick wall encroaches on their neighbor's property, what could the neighbor do anytime they wanted to?
Tear it down.
They can knock it down because it's on their property. So they don't want to take that kind of a risk. So we went to the builder and we said, listen, you need to take care of this. And the builder said, well, what do you want me to do? Move the wall? I said, no, I don't care if the wall can stay where it's at as long as
Get an easement. Get an easement.
Get an easement. Because if you get us an easement, that means we have what kind of permission? Permission that's gonna last for how long?
Permanent permission.
Permanent, forever, for that wall to stay where it's at. We wanted an appurtenant easement, and I wanted my buyer's property to be which? The dominant or servient property?
The dominant.
Dominant, and the next door neighbor's property to be the servient property. And the
No,
builder,
I'm guessing that was not free.
and
Was
the,
it?
the builder said, well, I don't know how I'm gonna accomplish that. I've already sold the house next door. I said, well, you better go talk to them and see if they'll give you an easement. And he did, and he went and talked to the guy he sold the house to next door, who happened to be an attorney. So as soon as he explained the situation to the owner next door, the attorney said, oh, I understand exactly what you need. You need an easement. And the builder said, yeah, I do, but only about 6 inches. And the attorney said, well, let me ask you something. How much would it cost you to have to move that brick wall? That just seems like it'd be really expensive to me. And he said, yeah, it cost me about $50,000 to move the brick wall. And so the attorney said, well, then I think $25,000 sounds very reasonable for a 6-inch easement.
Oh, wow.
And that's what
Wow.
he paid for, $25,000, and that easement is 6 inches wide.
Wow.
All the way down that property line.
So I have a question. You hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. It's kind of what we're talking about now, but a little bit further back when you were talking about how the appurtenant, is that how you pronounce it? How do you pronounce
Appurtenant.
Appurtenant easement it never goes away.
Mm-hmm.
But then you said the gross one, it does go away at some point. But then you're like, well, remember you gave us that example where you're like, it can go away, but it has to do with the land. For the first one, that's once that's attached. That's never going away. I'm confused about that. Why does it go away eventually? Because I guess.
Why does an easement in gross go away eventually? An appurtenant easement doesn't go away.
Appurtenant. But you gave an example earlier where you were like, I can't remember what the example was, but I've been stuck on it. I should have asked then, but
I don't think
it was the power company.
That's a power company. That's not an appurtenant easement. A power company easement, a utility easement, is an example of an easement in gross, which we're getting ready to talk about. Appurtenant easements don't benefit companies. If you're talking about a company or a person, you're not talking about an appurtenant easement. An appurtenant easement doesn't benefit. What benefited from the easement I just talked about? The one with the driveway and the wall and the fence and all that. What benefited from it?
Person. The land.
What
person?
The owner.
Not the owner.
The land.
The land. The property.
The land benefited. It's not the owner that benefits, it's the land that benefits. Because the land that's allowed to encroach on the land next door. That's why it's the land that benefits, not a company or a person. If Duke Power has an easement, who benefits from the easement?
Duke Power.
That's a different type of easement, which we're about to talk about.
Okay.
We haven't gotten there yet. Okay? It's all about who the easement or what the easement benefits. But I can tell you the simple answer. If it's two pieces of property and they're side by side, what kind of easement are we talking about?
Appurtenant.
An appurtenant easement. How long is it going to last?
Forever.
The one where the easement is located, what do we call it?
Dominant.
Dominant.
Oh, no.
Servient.
Servient.
Located on the servient property, it's the other property that is considered dominant.
Dominant.
Right, okay with that? So then let's talk about the other type of easement.
Hold on, I have a question really quick.
I have one too.
So I'm still on the appurtenant easement. So back to that guy that you were talking about. I guess I just don't understand how it's land and not the person. So does that mean when this guy with the brick wall goes to sell his house, whoever buys it next will be perfectly fine?
Yes.
Whoever
buys it after them and whoever buys it after them. And
so the neighbor, like I guess the lawyer, he permanently gave up the 6 inches For the $25,000. That's what we're saying.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
correct.
Okay.
From now till the end of the existence of the universe. That's exactly right.
Also, Barbara asked, did lot number 1 have to give the other lots an easement across their property?
They don't have to, but generally speaking, these easements are created at the point in time when the properties are divided. And so if you're subdividing the property, it's one owner that owns all the lots. So if you're sitting down and you're going, okay, I want to subdivide my big piece of property into 4 lots, and somebody says, well, the only way you can do that is put an easement on lot number 1, what are you going to do? You stick an easement on lot number 1. It's your lot. And somebody says, oh, well, you also need another easement on lot number 2. What do? You stick an easement on lot number 2. It's your lot. It becomes much harder once you've sold the lots, because now you're dealing with different people. And that's when you have to start paying people, when you figure it out after the fact. See, this builder, this developer, the one that paid $25,000 for that easement, if we had found that problem before he sold the house next door, how much would that easement have cost him?
Nothing.
Nothing, because it would have been his lot. He would have just created the easement, and boom, it would have been there. But because he had already sold the property, he had to get paid, or had to pay. Okay?
Thank you.
Easements and gross. This is when the benefit of accessing somebody's property falls to a person or a company. And simply put, the benefit will last as long as the beneficiary does. If the beneficiary dies, the benefit dies. So, as an example of easement and gross, Google Fiber comes through my neighborhood, and they have an easement and gross to bury their cable across the front of my property. How long does that right to access my property last?
As long as the
Until they
company
die or till the company closes.
Until Google goes out of business, which could be a very long time, but it will eventually happen. And when it happens, what will happen to that easement?
It's expired.
It goes away.
It'll go away. It'll go away. When Duke Power goes out of, how many easements do you think Duke Power has in North Carolina?
A lot.
A lot.
Millions, probably, right?
Yeah.
And when and if they go out of business, what will happen to all those easements?
Terminate.
They will terminate. They will go away.
So is that what happened when they changed from CP&L or when they were bought out?
Now, when companies merge and are bought out, they are allowed to transfer their easements. That's different than going out of business. When they merge or are bought out, they're allowed to transfer their easements as an asset. So that's a little bit different. But if the company just goes belly up and just straight out of business,
okay,
your easements go away.
Okay. Travis?
Yes.
I have a question. So I lived out in horse country, and the county has a hunt that allows fox hunting across everybody's land. And my understanding has always been that I guess the hunt has an easement as the company. Is that accurate? So I always assumed it was an appurtenant easement, but well, I don't know now that I'm thinking about it.
Probably an easement and gross.
It's probably that would be owned by the hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And so as long as that hunt stayed in business,
they would have the easement.
They would have the easement. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll give you a real world example. In Western North Carolina, there was a gentleman who bought a piece of property, and it had a railroad trestle across the back of his property, and it was still being used by Georgia Pacific. Freight train went through there once a day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
And he started doing some research on the property. He just was kind of a history buff, and he was looking, I mean, it's a big property, and he started looking into like the history of when the railroad was put there. And he found out that railroad trestle was actually built by the Western North Carolina Railroad Company. And that's who the easement was still in the name of. If you look at the current map of the property, the current plat map of the property still shows the Western North Carolina Railroad Company as the easement holder. Here's the problem. The Western North Carolina Railroad Company went out of business in 1962.
Wow.
They didn't merge with another railroad. They didn't get bought by another railroad. They just declared bankruptcy and went out of business. So what he figured out was that Norfolk Southern was actually trespassing on his property every day that freight train came through, because they had no legal access. They assumed that they did, but they had no legal access. And so he tried to contact them and got nowhere. So he solved the problem. He went to Home Depot and he bought one of those little sheds that, you know, they deliver all put together. And when they brought it out on the truck, they asked him where he wanted to put it. He pointed to the railroad trestle out there. He said, put it right up there. They said, we can't do that. He said, it's my property. I'm telling you, put it up there. And so he sat the shed on the railroad tracks. And then he camped out and waited for the train.
Oh my God.
And the freight train came through and they had to break the freight train, stop out in the middle of nowhere. And of course the conductor gets down and yelling and screaming at him. And he says, listen, if you don't get off my property, I'm gonna shoot you because you're trespassing. And so they got all kinds of lawyers and everybody out there. And here's what it turned out. He was right. They had no legal right to be on his property. And he told them, he said, listen, we can easily resolve this. All you need is an easement across my property. It's already got a railroad track there for you to use. All you need is an easement. And I'll be glad to what?
Sell it to
you. Sell you one.
That's awesome.
He did. He sure did. Smart guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Guess who else was happy about that?
All the neighbors.
All his neighbors. That's exactly right. Because they all figured out exactly the same thing. They all figured out exactly the same thing. All right. We good on easements?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Good deal. Good deal. All right. So, by the way, easements can be created voluntarily or involuntarily, meaning most of the time they're created voluntarily by the owner of the property. Sometimes they can be taken by government action. Those are much more rare. We're going to talk about government actions and taking things a little bit later on, but the law can create easements in absolute necessity in certain situations where they have to be. You may see a test question about how easements end, how they're terminated, how we get rid of an easement. And what I will tell you is there's a big long list here of reasons why easements go away, but they all take a court action. Easements have to be terminated in court. You can't just say, oh, well, you know, you've abandoned the easement, so the easement no longer exists. You have to go to court and get a judge to decide that the easement has been abandoned. So it's not as simple to end an easement. It's not simple to get rid of one. And so on the test, they like to, you know, say, oh, you know, Nicholas has an easement that he hasn't used in the last 20 years, and then they'll give you an answer choice that says, well, he's abandoned the easement, so it no longer exists. That's not true. It's not abandoned until a court says it's abandoned. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yep.
Okay, good, good. We just kind of sort of mentioned just now what an encroachment is. An encroachment is when any improvement crosses over a property line. And the best way to look for them is something called a survey. Survey is the primary, so if you're ever asked on a test what the primary purpose of a survey is, there are a lot of things a survey will do. It'll tell you where the boundaries are. It'll tell you how much land there is. It'll tell you all kinds of things. But the main reason we do a survey is to make sure that there are no encroachments on the property, because encroachments are actually really dangerous from the standpoint of trying to sell the property. They make it so you cannot get title insurance on the property. And we're going to talk more about title insurance in chapter 5 tomorrow. But encroachments would make it so that you cannot obtain title insurance when you're trying to purchase or sell the property, which can stop a sale. So encroachments are a pretty big deal. When you find them, they need to be corrected. You either need to create an easement that allows for the encroachment, or you need to remove the item that is encroaching. What do you think the most common encroachment is? What item do you think is most?
A tree.
I heard trees. What else?
Fence.
Fences, absolutely. Where's the fence company gonna put your fence?
Right on the
Properly done.
Or you tell them.
Where you tell them to. And they are not gonna take responsibility for where that property line is. If you tell them to put it here, that's where they're gonna put it. So what should you do before you have a fence put up?
Have a survey.
Have a survey done so you know where the property line is for sure, so that your fence does not encroach on your neighbor's property, because that could create an issue down the road. Okay. And the last thing for today, I'm going to leave you with math. Isn't that nice of me? Don't you love that?
Thank you.
You're so welcome. I'm going to leave you with some math. We're going to talk about just a little bit of math. The first math we come to in the class is property tax math. Property taxation. Now there's lots of different taxes we deal with, so get out of the habit of just saying taxes, because that could be income taxes, that could be capital gains taxes, that could be property taxes, it could be anything. So say property taxes when you be specific, because the test will. Property taxation in North Carolina is what we call an ad valorem tax. There's more Latin for you. An ad valorem tax. Ad valorem literally translates on value. So if you were asked, how are properties taxed in North Carolina? They're taxed based on their what?
Value.
They take tax based on their value. So if you have two properties sitting side by side and one is worth more, in theory, the tax bill should be what?
Higher.
Be higher. It's not a matter of how many acres you have. It's not a matter of how much space you have or how much square footage. It is a matter of value. Now, generally, more acreage, more value, but that's not always true. So it's strictly a matter of value. Now, this would all be on the North Carolina section of the exam. This is state specific. The law in North Carolina that creates property taxation is called the Machinery Act. I don't know why it's called the Machinery Act. I didn't write the law. It's called the Machinery Act, and it says that properties will be taxed based on something called their assessed market value. Assessed market value means the county is going to tell you what your property's worth in their eyes, and then they're going to tax you based on that number. Do you think that might create some disagreements from time to time?
Yes.
Where people disagree with the taxation number that comes from the county? What do you think?
Yeah.
Sure does. Guess what? They don't care. They don't care. They really don't.
You can appeal their assessment.
You can.
We did, and we won.
You won one?
We did. We won.
Did you have a factual error? Was there like a mismeasurement or something like that?
Well, the market changed, and they didn't accommodate for the market change. So housing values came way, way down, and our tax value was still tied to a value that was no longer true.
Well, good for you. Where was that located?
Pinehurst.
In Pinehurst. Okay. Well, I'm glad to meet somebody who won one of those, because the road is littered with people who have not won those appeals. They just kindly tell you to have a nice day and pay your bill on the way out.
Go on your way. Yeah.
North Carolina uses a 100% market value approach, meaning they don't reduce the market value to calculate the property taxes. Whatever the county assesses as your market value, that's the number they're going to use to calculate the tax value. Now, let me show you how this might be different on the exam if you use, or if you see it in the national section. In the national section of the exam, I got to change my share here for a second. Let me stop this one and share this one. On the national section of the exam, you might see something that says, you know, the state of Illinois assesses properties with an assessed tax value that's 80% of market value. Okay, so you'd see something that says something like this: 80% of market value. Here's your first math lesson in the class. This word right here, of. When you see that word of in conjunction with a percentage sign, that of means multiply. So anytime you see 80% of something, that means you're going to take that number and multiply it times 80%. Did everybody hear me on that? Are we good there? It's anytime. If you say 65% of $400,000, that just means 400,000 times 65%. Because of, when you're dealing with percentages, means multiply. So far, so good?
Yeah.
So if you saw something on the national exam that said something like, a home has a market value of $250,000 and Illinois uses 80% of market value to calculate taxes, what's going to be your first math step?
Multiply.
80 times.
You got to put the dollar number in first. 250,000 times what?
0.8.
Times 80%. Now, so here's a hint about calculators, because I know some of you are so young you've never used one. And I'm not kidding when I say this. Your cell phone is your enemy. Your cell phone will take this 80% times $250,000 and give you the correct answer. If you type that into a calculator, it will blow up and melt out of your hand. No, it won't do that. It'll just give you the wrong answer. You can't type the percent first on a calculator. You can't do it that way. Here's why that's important. When you get to the PSI exam, guess what they're not going to let you use?
Cell phone.
The cell phone. You got to use a regular handheld calculator. So you need to learn now how to type it into a regular handheld calculator. So you always type in the dollar amount first. If you want to know 80% of $250,000, that's 250,000 times 80%. Are we okay with that? Everybody good with that? That's a calculator lesson, not a math lesson. But we got to do it because you got to know how to do it. All right. Now I'm gonna go back to my. Are we all good on the word of? We good with that? Now,
Yes.
North Carolina, as I said, uses this method of calculating taxes based on 100% of market value. So you don't have to worry about that math step in North Carolina. We use 100% of the market value. When you're doing the math in North Carolina, you're going to be looking at tax values that are only set once every 8 years. That assessed, now, I'm not saying the taxes, the tax bill itself is going to stay the same for 8 years. Because when you're calculating the tax bill, there's also a tax rate, and the tax rate can change from year to year.
Yeah.
But the assessed value of the property, and they're going to ask a test question about this, and it's going to be in the North Carolina section. The assessed value of the property only changes how often?
Every 8 years.
Every 8 years. It's called an Octennial Reappraisal. Is everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Here's why it's every 8 years. The county has to actually physically visit every single property in the county and come up with a value for it. I think that would take a while.
Yeah.
And so they don't want to do that on an annual basis. It's expensive, it's time consuming. So basically, when your property gets assessed, that number is going to stay with your property for 8 years. Are market values going to change during that 8 year period?
Yes.
Of course they are. And that's why as an agent, you're never going to want to use property tax values as a guideline for what the current market value is. Because for all you know, that number could be 5, 6, 7 years old. We all good with that?
Wait, say that last sentence again.
I said, as an agent, when you're in the real world, you'll never want to use property tax values and
Yes.
apply
Yes.
for what current market value is, because that number could be very dated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, could an exception be though when you do construction, they do reassess your house then?
When you do, if you do construction, they may reassess your house at that point in time. They may not. They may just add some percentage of value. They may not actually physically visit the property. So I would just always say property tax value is a very poor estimate of current market value.
Got it.
Okay, just to be safe. Are we all good on the idea of an octennial reappraisal?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So let's say you get some work done and you know the person who did the work for your house and it wasn't up to code. It could be up to code, but nobody knows you got it done because, yeah. How did they appraise your house like that if your improvements aren't in the city codes?
Clearly, they're not going to be aware of them, which is why that's illegal.
I know.
And
people still do it.
And so if and when they catch it, they will not only reassess at that point in time, but they'll charge penalties for any unpaid taxes over the years. And by the way, these counties and municipalities are getting real slick at catching stuff like that. Carrie uses Google Earth now to see if you've done things in your yard.
Wow. I'm from like a small town, so if people know about Google Earth where they from, they might not have internet. So
yeah, well, eventually they'll. I mean, I'm just saying, depending on where you are, they could be real vigilant about that sort of thing. In North Carolina, this is the property tax timetable, and you need to know this for the exam. Property taxes are billed on January 1 every year, or not. I'm sorry. Take that back. They're not billed. My brain is fried. They become a lien on January 1 of every year. So my 2020 property taxes on my house, when did they become a lien?
January 1st.
January 1st of
2020. Is everybody with me on that?
Mm-hmm.
They're already a lien. Okay? So I already owe money to Wake County and the town of Cary. The question is, how much do I owe? And the answer is what?
Don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know, because it won't even be billed until when?
September.
Until September. The bills become available in September. This is the one lien that they create before they even know how much you owe them. The lien goes into effect even before, and the reason they do that is because if you sell property before September, what they're saying is you still owe us what?
Property tax.
Property taxes. And people say, well, how do I know how much to pay? The bill's not even out. You base it on the year before. It's the best estimate we have is the year before. Okay, so the bill's going to come out in September. The payment, people often ask, when is it due? Well, it's due as soon as it's billed, but that's not the really important question. What's important is, when is it late? And it's late the following January 6th. What's dangerous about this date right here? What could happen on this date if you haven't paid your property taxes?
Foreclosure process.
Foreclosure.
You could begin the process of foreclosing on the property for unpaid property taxes. Okay, so becomes a lien on January. Now, I know this is going to sound silly to some of you, but I have to point it out because some of you in the past, this has caught people. We're not talking about January 1 to January 6, 5 days. We're not saying it becomes a lien on January 1 and 5 days later they can foreclose on your house. We're saying it becomes a lien on January 1 of 2020, but it could be foreclosed on January 6th of 2021. What? One, the following year. So it's a year and 6 days later.
Well, and once you get your bill, it's really on like 4 months later.
It's really only 4 months after you get the bill, right? Ish, something like that. We all good on this timetable because you're gonna need to know that.
So if you buy a house in, you know, July, June, whatever, anytime before September, does the new owner, are they responsible for that whole year's property tax?
The seller pays their fair share on the way out, and we're gonna actually work on how to prorate those, how to break that down and prorate those. The seller will pay their fair share on the way out. And then and they actually won't pay that to the county. Interestingly enough, they'll just give it to the buyer and say, "Here's my share of the taxes for when the bill comes due."
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Let me introduce you to what a math formula is going to look like in this class. This is what a math formula will look like in this class. It's called a T-bar. I will admit to you that for a very long time, I was very resistant to using these things, but that's because I was a math person. I thought this is really silly. I thought, why would anybody want to do that? I am here to tell you, this is the best math tool you will ever embrace in your life, because it will take the thinking out of formulas. You don't have to think. How many of you just loved algebra? You just loved solving equations and coming up with formulas. There's some of you. How many of you hated it?
I hated it.
All right.
Thank you.
You people that hated it, you don't have to solve this equation. It's already solved for you. Here's the way a T-bar works. How many things do you see in that T? I get it, it's a circle, but there's a T inside the circle. How many things do you see in that T?
Three.
Three things, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's always 2 on the bottom and 1 on the top. Does everybody see that?
Yep.
Yes.
And by the way, we call, just in case you didn't know why we call it. You know, I could say I pity the fool who doesn't know who that is, but some of you that reference, some of you might, some of you not. But when we talk about a T-bar, there's always 3 things in it. And the way it works is the 2 things on the bottom are multiplied to equal the thing that's on the top. And we'll say that again. If you look at, so if I back up to this formula, the 2 things on the bottom, what would you do with them?
Multiply.
If you multiply them, what is that going to tell you?
The top, the property tax bill.
The bill. Everybody with me on that?
Okay.
If they're side by side, what do?
Multiply.
You multiply them. All right, I'm going to take that off of there for a second. Look at this. Look at this slide again. Look at the stuff. Look at the relationship between the top and the bottom. What symbol is there?
Divide.
So if you have a number that's up here and a number that's down here, what are you going to do with them? You're going to divide them. So let me go back here. If I have the property tax bill and I divide it by the assessed value, what is that going to tell me?
Tax rate.
Tax rate. Watch how fast you can now solve this thing. I want to know how to calculate the property tax bill. This is what I want to know. What 2 things do I have? What do I have to do?
Multiply the assessed value by the
times the rate.
Assessed value times the rate. How fast was that?
Quick.
I want to know the tax rate. What's my math going to look like?
Divide the property bill by the assessed value.
The bill divided by the assessed value. Does that make sense for everybody? Easy. That's it. That's all. That's the math in this class. That's it. All you got to remember is that little picture. All you got to, and here's the thing. Here's the beauty of it, really. I've had people say, so I only have to remember where 3 things are in there? I said, no. All you got to remember is where one thing is. The only thing you got to remember is which one's on the top. So what are you going to do with the other 2?
Divide.
Throw them in the bottom. Somebody said, well, I don't know which one goes on the right or which one goes on the left. Guess what? It doesn't matter. All you got to know completely how to work the property tax formula is know the 3 things that are part of it: the property tax bill, the assessed value, and the rate. And you know that the bill goes on top. And you just memorize the property tax formula. Can you work with that? Seriously?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it, folks. That's it. Watch how crazy fast this is going to be. What if I told you there's a property in Chapel Hill? What if I told you there's a property in Chapel Hill that has an assessed value of $700,000 and the tax rate in Chapel Hill is 1.76%? Could you tell me what the bill is going to be that year?
$1,232.
Listen again. How'd y'all come up with that so fast? What did you do? You did what?
Assessed value multiplied it by the rate.
Times 1.76%. And if you're using your calculator, you should have a percent button there.
Right.
And how much is it?
$1,232.
Well, 232, I think is what I heard.
320.
Well, 320.
Oh, okay.
Oh, 320.
320.
Yeah.
How hard is that?
Can we go over it like one step at a time? Because there was so much noise I couldn't hear like any of that.
Yeah, what did you not hear? Talk to me.
I didn't hear like any of it. Whenever you like the last thing you wrote was right, and then I like heard nothing except for like everyone talking.
Okay, so I said if the assessed value is $700,000 and the tax rate is 1.76%, what's the property tax bill? What does the formula tell me to do? If I want to know the property tax bill, what are the other 2 things? They're side by side, right? And so that means what do we do with them?
So you're going to multiply.
We're going to multiply. So the assessed value, which we said was $700,000, times the rate, which is 1.76%, it gives us a tax bill of $12,320.
Thank you.
You okay?
Yeah.
Good. Is there anybody that's lost so far on that? I mean, and it's okay if you are, but I need to know because I want to make sure we catch you up. Are you okay? Yes. Because honestly, you just answered math questions on the test.
Yes.
You really did. And yes, they're that simple, some of them. They really are. All you got to know is how to tackle. Can you memorize that little picture? Can you memorize 3 things?
Yeah.
Memorize which one's on the top.
Yep.
That's all you got to do to learn. In your OneDrive folder, on the math worksheets of that, you have all the math formulas as T-bars. I've already given you all the formulas for the whole class there as T-bars. It's in that folder on OneDrive, FYI. Okay? So, when we look at, I'm going to skip ahead here for a second. When we look at this formula, the one thing that you might be throwing a curveball, it's not even really a curveball, is how they're going to present the tax rate to you. Because you need to know this tax rate down here. The state is obnoxious sometimes, and they can't just do things the easy way. They can't say that the tax rate is 1.5%. Here's what they're going to say. The tax rate is $1.50 per $100 of value. $1.50 per $100 of value. This is super complex. You better pay attention. Drop the dollar sign off and put a percent sign there. And you just converted that to a percentage. $1.50 is the same thing as 1.50 what? Percent. Is everybody okay with that? Literally, I didn't change it. I didn't divide it. I didn't move the decimal. I didn't do anything other than drop the dollar sign off and stick a percent sign on there. That's all I did. That's all. And that's all you have to do. How else could they give you curveballs on this? Maybe they give you 2 tax rates. Maybe they give you a city tax rate and a county tax rate. Well, if the property is located in the city, which rate do you think you're going to have to pay?
Both.
Both of them. You're going to pay, every property pays a county tax rate, and if it's located in the city, it's also going to pay the city tax rate. So what do you think you would do with the tax rate?
Just add them together.
Add them together.
Add them together. That's it. That would be all. Okay. So here's what I want from you all for this evening. In your folder, in your OneDrive folder, stop this for a second. In your OneDrive folder, again, I guess I could put that up for you. You have, I believe, I don't want to speak out of turn here. Let me pull that up just to make sure I'm giving you the correct information here. Bear with me just a second. All right, let me share this. In your OneDrive folder, you should have a document called, here's the share. Under math worksheets, you should have one called Chapter 3 Property Tax Math Worksheet. Does everybody see what I'm showing you there? Everybody see that?
Yeah.
All right, I want you to work on that for tonight. I want you, and don't freak out if you can't do it all. This is the first introduction. We want to see where you are. So I want you to work on that property tax math worksheet tonight. All right. And that's also where the math formulas are for you there.
You said it will be in your, so you click the math worksheet folders, and I have
Yep, so you just go to the OneDrive link that we sent you at the beginning of the class, and then you're going to go into the math worksheets folder. It should be right there. Okay, is everybody okay with that? Know how to find it?
Yes.
How many questions is it?
How many questions is it? That's a good question.
Is it 11?
For homework, it says 11.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just want to make sure I was on the right one.
Yep, you can do the in-class and the homework section. Normally we do go on both because I use these when in, but you know, I would suggest you definitely do the 11 that are in the homework section. But yeah, it's 11 total in the homework section. Okay. All right, and, but wait, there's more. It's like an infomercial. The other thing I want you to do for tonight is you have not just one, but 2 quizzes to take. One quiz on chapters 1 through 2 and one quiz on chapter 3. And I'm going to put them right now. I'm going to link them in the chat, but Seth is also going to send you an email with them because he has the email list there in front of him. And so he's going to send you an email with these. Here's the first one. That is for chapters 1 and 2. And I'll put that behind chapters 1 and 2. And then here is the second one. And that is chapter 3. And Seth will send you a email link to them as well. And so when I see your beautiful smiling faces tomorrow, I will have a much better idea of how much gleaned from the last couple of days, because as you're taking those quizzes on Class Marker, I can see your results. So just, Big Brother's always watching. But no, it's just an online quiz application, and it should be set up. Hopefully, if we've set it up correctly, I hope we have. And I apologize if there are errors in something. I don't think so, but you're the first online pre-licensing class I've done. Normally, I
think you said the same one twice.
Because they both say chapter 3.
Yeah, they both say chapter 3.
Are they the same ones in?
Oh, I did. I just sorry, you're right. I copied and pasted the same one twice.
Are they the quizzes in the book? The same thing?
No, they are not the quizzes.
Okay, that's good, because they're pretty long.
They are not the quizzes.
We get like our results from the quiz like right after we take it and everything. Okay.
And you will get explanations for each question.
Awesome. Okay.
Okay. So for tomorrow, you got those 2 quizzes, and you've got the math worksheet to work on, and I'll see you all just bright and smiley at 9 o'clock.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Travis. Have a good one.
Quick question.
I had a question too.
The math, the math we do like in our notebooks, and the quizzes is what you're going to be able to see, right?
The quizzes, I won't be able to see the math. I'll see the detailed solutions for the math, but there is some math in the chapter 3 quiz, so I'll see how you did on those math questions.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
I have one question. Recording from yesterday available yet?
Yes, I have to go back and look and send the link. They should be.
Okay, because my electricity went out at one point yesterday, so I missed probably about a minute or 2.
Yeah, I wasn't very good about remembering to hit record every time yesterday, so some of it might not be there, but I'll go back and send them.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Assignment for